Ever wonder what happens when a strategy consultant and a speaking coach walk into a podcast studio? Yeah, us too. But here we are.
Turns out, the answer involves a lot of coffee, a few bad jokes, and some pretty great conversations about things that actually matter in the working world, beyond the business cards.
We're talking real stories, real insights, the highs, the lows, and maybe even the office snacks that keep us going.
So if you're here for a laugh, a little inspiration, or just curious about what two corporate casualties have to say, you're in the right place. I'm Jeff.
And I'm Charlie.
And let's get
Casually
Pro. Hey. Today, Charles, we are in duo. The topic you proposed is connectors versus influencers. Charles, how are you today?
I'm doing fantastic. And I don't know if you know this about me, but I am borderline obsessed with this topic of
Ooh.
conversation. There is something so uniquely profound about knowing the difference between what an influencer is capable of and what a connector is capable of.
Let's see if we can what we can do with this obsession, Charles. But first, before we even start, I'd like you to give us a definition about what you mean when you say connector and what you mean when you say influencer.
You know what? That's entirely fair. I think in a lot of people's minds, they're the same thing, and it couldn't be further from the truth. So let's start with an influencer. I think a lot of people can picture an influencer, whether it's a social media influencer, someone on LinkedIn with thousands and thousands of followers. There's all sorts of different types of influencers, so to speak. And what they really come down to is they are a massive channel for reaching tons and tons of people, but they don't really connect individually with those people. It's more of a speaking out into a crowd and not getting too much of a response back in terms of actual developing of a relationship with your audience, your individual audience, or with the individuals inside of that audience, so to speak. So if you would picture, right, it's someone on a podium with a mic talking at a bunch of people in a crowd, but there's no Q&A, so to speak.
It's a person who talks, but who don't get information from the people he talks to or she talks to.
Yeah, and I mean, the idea is kind of difficult to put into that perspective just because everyone has a voice when it comes to social media and any kind of commenting or the ability to voice an opinion over what is being put in front of them, right? But the overall view is that influencers might monitor the replies, but they don't adjust or create really deep kind of relationships with the audience that they speak to, so to say. And that kind of brings us to the difference, the big difference between an influencer and a connector. So connector is kind of the opposite in one major respect. So a connector can have a massive audience. There are people who have thousands and thousands of followers, but they take time to kind of understand the makeup of their followers, the basis for why they're connecting with the followers, and ultimately building deep relationships with maybe not all of the followers, but a decent chunk of the people that they speak with. And so they're really highly invested in the relationship and the kind of Q&A that goes on between themselves and their audience. Again, if I can give the speaker an auditorium kind of example here, they are speaking to a large crowd, but they're asking the crowd questions, and they're actively creating a dialogue between them and someone in the crowd to build whatever they're trying to put out into that community.
Okay, so we have the influencer who's talking and brings informations to a crowd of people, and this information is not really dependent on what happens in the individuals that constitute the audience versus the connector. Try to know more deeply the people who constitute their audience, and so the information that they give to their audience is kind of dependent of those relation and what they know about the people who are following them.
Yeah, absolutely. The easiest way to picture it is wide versus deep, right? There can be an
Mm.
influencer that has a lot of reach in terms of the amount of followers that they have. They can have, hundreds of thousands to millions of followers, but they don't really take the time to dig deep past the superficial level to get that level of relationship with their followers. But someone who is a connector might have a much smaller pool, say thousands or hundreds of people, but they really invest a lot of time in getting to know their audience, getting to know what they need, and developing relationships that are beneficial for both sides. So it's not one sided telling someone to do something or to buy something. It's more of a conversation going on between the two of them to meet several needs.
Okay, so it's not just dependent on the numbers, the number of people that's in the audience. Like it
No.
would be possible to have millions of people in your audience, but still be a connector because you take the time to create deep connections with some people in the audience. Of course, would not be 50%, but it would be something that's part of your schedule in a way. Like you every maybe every week you know that you will spend a certain amount of time to know more the people who are in your audience, something that an influencer might not do at all.
Yeah, absolutely. I think while it is really difficult to kind of conceptualize, okay, I have X amount of thousands of followers. Does that mean that I'm reaching out to X amount of thousands of people every day to just say, oh, hey, how are you doing? To build these relationships. That's not quite how it works. But at some point,
Yeah.
you have attempted to reach out to most of the followers, or at least key followers within your following, to develop deeper relationships, to understand, a deeper part of your follow. Whereas influencers will kind of just collect to collect, right? They're playing a numbers game. The more amount of
Mm,
followers that
yeah.
they have, the easier that they can do things in terms of creating business opportunities for themselves or others. Whereas a connector will kind of cherry pick these great opportunities and kind of build really deep connections to make
Okay,
those opportunities work.
can you please elaborate on this notion of a deep connection that you have with someone? At which point can you say that this connection is deep and not just superficial? Is there some rule of thumb here?
I think if I was able to categorize and create like a rule as to what constitutes deep, I would be a millionaire, billionaire maybe. Uh, because that would kind of help define relationships in general, which I think is something that humans have been trying to do since the dawn of time, right? But there are some key indicators to kind of show that you have a
Mm.
deep connection with someone. I think a great example is how you and I got together, right? How you and I created this podcast and how we went from complete strangers to, oh, let's build something together and let's do something really cool. We started because we met through a really interesting social group that gets a lot of professionals together and really gives them the opportunity to network. And at first, you and I just knew what we did individually as a profession. And in doing so, I kind of got an idea of what you might need, what you might like, and some people that could help you along your way to create your business. And that is kind of the precipice of where everyone lands, right? If I go on LinkedIn right now and I look someone up, I can see what they do, and it gives me a good idea of what they might need, right? So that is kind of the end all be all for an influencer. Is they stop right there. They stop at the very superficial. What a connector, and what I consider myself to be a connector, does is they say, okay, now I know what they might need. How can I directly connect them to a service, a person, an organization, something that gives them more value up front? And I think the first time that you and I spoke outside of meeting for the first time, I told you about a colleague of mine who was doing something similar to what you were doing, and I connected both of you. So that level of activity starts creating relationships, right? You now know that I know other people who can help you. And so you are more inclined to answer my calls, answer my texts, or to reach out to me if you find something that might help me. And that deeper level of relationship gets built from generosity. And
Yeah.
there are a whole host of different
Mm.
ways too. I mean, outside of generosity, if you were living in New York, for example, and we kept running into each other at events, I would say, "Oh, I know Jeff," and I can introduce you to someone into the crowd that might be really beneficial for you to know them or them to know you. And so overall, I guess the real meat and potatoes of how you define whether or not something is a deep connection is how likely are you to continue with that relationship given no benefit to yourself?
Wow, we have many interesting things here, and things that uh, echoes to deep and beautiful values. You talked about generosity, leading
Absolutely.
with this concept of leading with generosity. And you also
Yeah,
talked of that a deep relationship is knowing how you can help a person. And I think this is extremely meaningful. It's something I personally started a few months ago. Before, I didn't have this view on it. You know, when you have a business and you go to networking events, of course you want to talk about your business. Of course you want potential leads, partners. But what do you do with all those people who can be amazing people, but who just don't need what you offer? But in fact, if you try to understand them and understand what they need to, then you can do something more. Then you can try to find what other people that you met need in the people who you meet. So you don't just go there to meet people for you, but you also go there, you meet new people because you might find someone who can help someone who you met previously.
absolutely. You know, there is a really interesting concept that I'm working on developing called strategic generosity. Now, the idea is fairly simple, is you don't have to be a purely selfless person to be generous, and nor should you. I think people who go out there and only give and only create opportunities for other people end up wearing themselves out, and you become neither a connector nor an influencer. You just end up kind of getting used. And so the idea is to pivot outside of that purely selfless idea and create an actionable kind of way to be generous, but that also gets you what you need. The idea is very simple, is when you approach someone and you have a need in mind, they have their own need in mind, and you try to trade, your relationship becomes transactional. And a transactional relationship only benefits the person who has the leverage. You can imagine a young software engineering grad approaching the VP of AI at Google. The grad is looking for a job, most likely, and the VP probably needs a very complicated solution to a problem that they might be facing. Now, the VP can very easily probably get that grad a job, but the grad can't really create any kind of value that puts the VP in a position to where their problem is solved. So in that transactional relationship, the grad is going to lose every time because they can't offer anything. To flip that on its head, imagine if instead the grad came up to the VP and didn't ask for something, but instead said, can I give you something? Can I recommend a book? Can I recommend a person who might be able to help? Can I put you in contact with one of my professors who might understand your problem a bit better? There are a whole host of things that you can give. And even if you can't give anything, you can at least give time, attention, and generosity, the visage of generosity to someone. And so when you do that, you disarm this concept of, well, everything is transactional, right? The kind of relationship in networking has to be transactional. You beat that and turn it on its head and say, no, even if I can't get something directly from someone, I can still give and I can still put myself in their good graces. And now that VP is more likely to think, okay, well, even if this kid, this engineering grad, can't do anything for me, he approached me not asking for something, but trying to give me something. So I would love to try to give something back. By nature, humans are very reciprocal, right? If you give me something, I want to give you something back. If you take something from me,
Wow,
I want to take something back.
even in this case, I'm not even sure it's just strategic because, as the VP of engineering, I might think, wow, this person is aware that they can't help much, but yet they still try to help. They still try to offer something. This might be a person who's once trained, will be a leader, will be someone with impact, will be able to have a huge, to bring something huge to the company. And so by leading with generosity, you might actually you show the people that you're someone who has potential, who wants to do something, who's standing out already from the crowd. You're not here for just for taking, but you're here for giving. And that's the kind of people you want to help to get high in the corporations. Yeah.
Absolutely. And the reason that I call it strategic generosity isn't because there's an angle to get what you want just out of it, but because the strategy is investment. When you invest time, energy, and resources into building relationships, it's much like growing a garden, right? Little things that you are able to do, and in this case, a grad and just going up to a VP saying, hey, maybe I can put you in contact with someone or recommend a book, or even just say that I'm here to help if there's anything I can do. That level of planting a seed in someone's mind over your capability, your generosity, and your overall nature yields so many benefits down the line, and almost even immediately, depending on the kind of reflection that person has of you. But I think ultimately, the way that you approach generosity has to be strategic because you are limited in the amount of work you can do. You are limited in the amount of places you can be. You are limited in the amount of time that you can give. And so you need to provide what you can provide when you can provide it, but in a way that doesn't put you behind. So in the case of that student, he could offer to work at Google for free. I'm not even talking internship. I'm talking borderline slave labor here. He could do that, but that doesn't get him anything. That doesn't help him. That doesn't help the VP. Ultimately, it's a false sense of generosity, right?
And he would put all his time into just one single thing. And then if this thing doesn't transform, then he loses everything because he didn't have time to create other opportunities.
Absolutely. And one of the tenets of tactical generosity is your ability to connect people. And that's where this idea, coming back to the idea of
Oh,
connectors,
because it literally takes less than 1 minute to put two people together.
bingo, exactly that. And it brings us back to the idea of connectors versus influencers, right? A connector is a master of tactical generosity because they can spend 2 minutes crafting an email or walking across a room with someone to introduce them to someone else, and you create that level of value, that level of capability in two people's minds, really, because you're bringing access to opportunities on both sides in a fraction of a moment that it would take for you to actually go out and do a project for them or work for them, or any other kind of direct capability that you might be able to bring to the table. And so being a connector by its very nature allows you to be tactical with your time, but also highly generous because you are giving people access to people and ultimately resources and organizations that they might need to know, right? So that is a huge, huge, huge benefit of the connector, where the influencer might be able to, let's say, uh, make a post that's being able to be seen by millions of people about, I don't know, an organization. And the problem is, and this gets into the nature of how those two work, is that that post has certain kind of attachments to it that are, how much effort do I need to give to contribute to that kind of organization or cause? If it's clicking a button and paying, generally it's very, very quick, and the turnaround for doing a post like that is really, it's really good. But if it's something like, I need you to go out to this place and do this thing, which is a time commitment, a travel commitment, something that's more than just a click and buy, um, the return on investment for that kind of post is going to be almost nothing, because the level of kind of gratuity that you would get from your base isn't built off of deep connections. It's just based on very easy, accessible content, right? So when you have something like a connector asking some other people in their network to do something, the ROI is much, much, much higher than if you have someone with millions and millions of followers posting for them to go do something that is a big time or travel or monetary commitment that they might not be ready to do.
I think we can easily draw a parallel between the people who you have on LinkedIn, who you really know. And so when you reach out to them, they will answer, to people that just randomly added you for some reason and that you will never hear anything from.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I can count on one hand the amount of people that I would travel the world for, but if one of them asked me to do it, of course I would. And there are people who specialize in creating those kinds of connections and really create a lot of value, both in a business sense, but also in a connector sense, by creating these different kinds of networks internally, right? Just to name a few, there's an interesting individual by the name of Keith Ferrazzi. He wrote a book called Never Eat Alone. He is a prolific figurehead for what it means to network. He breaks down networking in a very, I would say, technical way. But part of what he does is he says, okay, yes, you have to start by being generous, but you have to upkeep. You have to create deep connections by continuing to engage with individuals that you want to create these deep connections with, right? And he's built, in my opinion, an empire off of teaching people how to become connectors as opposed to influencers.
Wow. Can you tell us more? Like if I want to start to apply those concepts that we are talking about, I want to start to be a connector. What can I do?
Yeah, absolutely. So, my personal experience with becoming a connector stems from three different actions that I took to change how I network. The first of which we've already talked about. It's being generous. It's listening to someone, finding out what they need, and instead of saying, "Oh, well, if I help them, they might not be able to help me," throw that thought out the window and say, "Okay, I'm going to help them in a way that is reasonable for me to do so without the expectation of it being reciprocal." That's number one.
Okay.
Number two is develop a fascination for people. It sounds strange, but hear me out.
Mm. It
If
can become
you,
creepy.
yeah, it sounds a little creepy when you put it like that. Thanks, Jeff. But no, listen. Imagine, if you would, walking into a room full of people. Okay, a networking event. You kind of have to disassociate yourself from their experience, their kind of existence, to get kind of a numerical understanding of, okay, there's a ton of people here. But if you break down that wall and think, well, there's a ton of people here who have all had childhoods, who have all had really interesting experiences, who really like different kinds of things, have had different kinds of ways of thinking, and really start to understand that, okay, people are multifaceted and there might be something inside of this person that I would find so interesting, so desperately fascinating, that I just have to get to know them. If you change that
Wow. That's amazing.
yeah. If you change that mindset very quickly, you start to view networking not as a chore to build your career, but rather an opportunity to find something cool and new, or a kindred
Oh.
spirit in something that you're already interested in. There's tons of
So
opportunity.
here the mindset would be when you go to a networking event, you tell yourself, all right, so no, I'm gonna talk to this person or to a group, and there must be something amazing about this person. And my job is to find it.
Absolutely. 100%. I couldn't have said it better. That kind of switch in
Hmm.
mindset will allow you to change how you view people, first and foremost, but ultimately, it changes the nature of why you're there. You are discovering gold instead of having to do a chore like you would do laundry, for example. And
Wow, this is it really sounds like a life-changing mindset. You know, I,
uh,
I really
for me, it
believe
was.
that whenever you have the right mindset, it makes all the difference in the world between someone who can be inspired about what they do or someone who's like, oh, yeah, I do it because I have to. And this one
Exactly.
looks very powerful.
Absolutely. And the last part is, when you think about it, it's a little stupid and a kind of a duh thing, but a lot of people don't do it. It's consistency, upkeep. If I find someone who is desperately interesting, fantastically uh, provocative, and someone that I want to get to know, what do you think the easiest way I can do that is?
What's the easiest way to know them better?
Yes, the easiest way to get to know someone better is to talk to them, is to regularly speak with them, get an idea of how are they doing, what are they doing, how was their quarter, what kind of interesting projects were they doing. When you want to get to know someone, upkeep is key. I think I've had some really incredible conversations with individuals that I could see blossoming into a wonderful kind of friendship, or business opportunity. But, I'm a busy person, and they never reached out after that. And so if you don't upkeep and speak with the people that you're interested in regularly, you lose that level of connection. and they go
Oh.
back to strangers. So
Okay, okay. Wow, yeah. I think this one is really key. Like, don't expect anything to happen for you. If you meet someone interesting and want to know more, you have to make the steps. You have to propose the things. You have to reach out. You have to follow up.
absolutely. So just to kind of put a cap on all of this, the three big steps that anyone in the world can make to go from a non-connector to a connector is: one, be generous; two, find people fascinating; and three, upkeep. Make sure you're talking to the people that you want to connect with regularly. Doing those three simple things, and I say simple because they're easy to do, they're hard to do regularly. Doing those three things can take you to the upper stratosphere of connectors, especially if you do them consistently, regularly, and just make them a part of your everyday to-dos.
So now that you're talking about the consistency and about the daily to do, Charles,
Yes.
I would like to know what are the specific actions that you might do daily or weekly or monthly to keep touch with all the people you're connected with? What are you really doing? You know, when you say, yeah, you have to be consistent, you have to follow up. What are the actions, the concrete actions?
Absolutely. This is where I think we get a leg up now because of advances in technology where we didn't have them before. So, coming from a complete kind of non connector to building your connector status, the easiest thing that you can do every day to build that is develop your personal brand on any kind of platform that you want. So, mine, for example, I love LinkedIn. That's kind of where I spend most of my time. Um, I post things that I find interesting. I comment on people that post things that I find interesting. And I reach out to individuals who have milestones that they've accomplished. You know, maybe they start a new job, maybe they finished a really interesting project, maybe they're just celebrating a birth or an anniversary, something. And I make sure that I'm visible to them in ways that matter, right? Because I think anyone can kind of get the idea that, oh, if I comment on every single one of their posts, saying, oh, wow, that's cool, or oh, this is great, it's going to be annoying and borderline creepy, right? But if I'm reaching
That's
out
what
with
we want
something,
to avoid. Huh?
yeah, yeah, don't do that. That's a bad way to do that. But if you're reaching out, offering some kind of value or offering some kind of insight or celebrating with people when they have something to celebrate, that matters a lot. And that puts you in people's good graces quite easily. Now, on top of that, there are some other things that you can do that you can use to really boost your connectivity. And one of those things is a CRM or a personal CRM. I think a lot of people who work with sales or work in any kind of front facing position know what a CRM is, but it stands for Customer Relation Management Tool. There are now options for people to have that kind of capability, but for personal relations or business relations that aren't akin to sales, right? One that some colleagues of mine really like using is called Dex, and Dex is really cool because it's essentially a list of people that you input individually, and you can have options to set a reminder to reach out to that person after X amount of time. You can
Ah,
also store really valuable information there that might be akin to building those deeper relationships. Like, for example, if I had you in my Dex, I could put Jeff is the owner of GEOT and he does public speaking for tech professionals, but he also has a daughter and he also really loves XYZ thing, right? So
oof. I
he
was afraid. I was afraid you're gonna go too deep here.
no, I wouldn't do that to you. But the idea is that storing personal details or storing details about people that you want to have these deeper relationships with is really useful.
You want to have a little file or a little description of the people you meet so that whenever you get a meaningful information about them, you can add them in it. For example, if they're parents, if they, you know their birthday, if you know the projects they're working on or what they need, all those informations that can be valuable to maintain the relationship. Because when you're a connector, as you said, you know many people. Like I
Mm.
think I read that the human brain is made to know about 100 people because of the story of our evolution, and that's how the brain works. So it means that if you want to keep touch with many people, you need to have an external system to keep all those
Yeah,
informations.
yeah, absolutely. I mean, you can run into people who are extraordinary at that level that can handle thousands and thousands of people, like Keith, for example. But more realistically, yeah, I'd say about 100 people is right, or at least on the upper echelon of correct here. Me personally, I have the memory of a goldfish, so
Oh,
keeping
that's
people
that's that,
together.
that's actually that's a very good news, Charles, because people who are
Yeah.
listening right now, they might think, yeah, but Charles probably have some easy, natural easiness to remember things about people. That's not the case at all. That's good to
No,
know.
no, no, not at all. Yeah, and I speak about being a connector as someone who comes from a highly conservative field. So really getting to know people past what they do and the kind of more formal existences that we lead really wasn't a major concern of mine until I started going to more front of house positions. And
So tell
because
us more. What was this position where knowing people wasn't really mainstream?
yeah, so I was an accountant for quite a few years.
Oh yeah.
And
Oh yeah.
so
I think
unless
I
it
get what
was
you mean.
the other what 4 or 5 members of my team at the time, or the financials of the client that I was working on, I really didn't need to interact with people. And so that level of connection really didn't make a lot of sense for that job. But then I transitioned into financial consulting, uh, and that role had me talking to a ton of different people at the time, and really developing relationships was a major part of how I did my business. Um, so
Mm.
I can tell you with 100% certainty that if you do not have a natural aptitude for memorizing the names, faces, and details of a person, that does not mean that you can't be a connector, right? You have every capability to become a connector using tools, using these kinds of small changes in the way that you approach people and events to really make a massive change in the way that not only you're viewed, but you view yourself when it comes to networking and creating a network. So, uh, for all of you out there who are in a highly technical position and think that, well, maybe I don't need to do any of this connecting, or even worse, that you can't. The reality it's so far from out of your reach that I mean you could go out and do it right now. You could be a connector today if you just make a couple of little changes and really invest in finding tools that help you get to where you need to be.
Okay, so it's really a decision that you can take right now. From now on, I will become a connector. And so, what it changes compared to what you might do today is that now, whenever you go to a networking event, a place to meet people, when you first, the mindset that you have is to tell yourself that there is absolutely something amazing inside this person. And I will find what it is. I will dig, I will ask questions, I will see and find this thing. I will also understand what this person need, and if I can help this person, not by spending a lot of time, but with a little bit of my time, for example, connecting this person with another, or could be advising a book or an article, I help them. And I'm consistent. If I find someone very interesting, I myself will go to this person again, send messages so that we can talk again, maybe meet. And I don't
Absolutely.
wait for anything to happen. As a connector, I'm the one who reach out to the people that I know. And of course, I keep some files on everyone that I know because I might have the brain of a goldfish. So I note everything that is meaningful, how I can help people, where they are in their life, if I know anything meaningful about them. If I do all those, I'm a connector.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I think the big takeaway and another big takeaway here is that a lot of people are intimidated because they think connectors are only extroverts. And there's a whole nother kind of topic of conversation there, but
Oh, I think
the
we can
idea
do
is
an episode about that, Charles.
yeah,
Yeah, yeah,
yeah,
yeah, yeah. We will do an
that's a whole
episode
nother
about
thing.
it.
But but
Yeah,
but the
yeah,
thing that
yeah.
the one thing that I just want to say about this is that implementing those three things on any scale can make you a connector. If you do that with 5 people instead of 500, you are still a connector and you can still make an incredible following that can help you accomplish monstrous goals. It's just a matter of consistency. If you continue to do it, you continue to reshape the way that you view connecting. There's no telling the limits that you will hit just by making those little changes. So don't be intimidated into thinking that this is only for people. Jeff can tell you a little something about skills that highly technical, non-people related careers can build.
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. We'll do a whole episode about it. Spoiler, little spoiler. Everyone can really do it and have fun and find meaning into doing it.
Oh, absolutely, 100%. So, with that in mind, just bringing it back to connectors versus influencers, there is a really interesting dichotomy between the two. And funnily enough, you can be an influencer and a connector at the same time. They're not mutually exclusive, but more likely you are one or the other. And with that being said, access to connectors, access to people who create deep relationships with other people has benefits that might not be easily available for someone who is an influencer. And the simple way to put it is, if I had a product that you can go out, click 3 buttons and buy, I'm probably going to send that to an influencer to kind of disseminate that information of the product, because it's a very simple action to get benefit out of that relationship. But if I need someone to, I don't know, read a book or go to an event, or spend time doing something for me, I'm going to go to a connector, because that connector has developed those really deep relationships that allow them to kind of extract much more value out of someone in terms of being able to convince them to take their time, their effort, and much higher levels of dedication to something, and put that towards whatever they find to be interesting or worthwhile to really develop that. So if you are someone who is raising money for a charity of your choice, or if you want someone to come to your event and travel X amount of miles, or hours to get to where you're trying to go, or if you want someone to read something that is long and drawn out, like a technical paper, for example, connectors are your best bet. Overall, I think that both are really important and really beneficial to the business ecosystem, but you have to know which you approach or which you want to be to get what you actually want.
All right. That was very interesting.
See, Jeff, I knew you would get a little bit obsessed after this conversation.
Borderline obsessed. That's what you told me before, and I can understand why. Because I mean, relations are what makes being human great, right? If there were no relations, it would be only about ourselves and how we feel, and but relations is really what makes it meaningful to be on this world. And I would add something about, when you help someone. When I started to network with this different mindset, trying to find if people need someone specific and if I can match people together, the first time I did that, and when I saw the person telling me right after, wow, thank you so much, I discovered that just doing it, just helping people is so great. I mean, it makes us feel great. And I think this is one
Absolutely.
of the basis of being human. We feel great when we help people. It's somehow inscribed in our DNA.
Yeah, absolutely. And even if you're hardwired a little bit different to where you don't feel great. I had a
There are
wonderful
still other benefits.
yeah. Well, I had a wonderful
Oh,
teacher of mine
oh,
who
oh,
who
oh,
once
yeah, yeah, yeah.
used
Even if
who once
you
used to
will
tell
listen.
me that is it fattening? Is it illegal? Is it difficult to do? No, any of that? Then do it. Because the benefits that you get out of it are incredible outside of the warm and fuzzy feelings.
Wow. So
Because
okay,
you
so let's reformulate this. If you will listen to this right now, doesn't know what empathy even means. If you absolutely don't care about other people, being generous will help you will help you to become rich because people will help you in return after
yeah,
after you help them.
yeah,
So go out, be generous, make the world a better place, even if you don't care about it, because you will benefit from it.
100%.
It
Um,
works too. I think it's great that it works even in this case.
yeah, listen, you can be an entirely sociopathic connector, and generosity still works. But with all that said, this is a really interesting topic, and I encourage anyone who wants to learn more about being a connector to delve into some awesome material. For example, I mentioned "Never Eat Alone" by Keith Ferrazzi, but there's all sorts of different kind of books. There's one by Dale Carnegie that talks about making friends and influencing people. All sorts of different types of connectors throughout history, even that make excellent points that follow this and really give you a deeper technical understanding. So, the best time to be a connector, to learn about being a connector, is now. So,
Wow.
I highly encourage everyone to start thinking about how you view connecting people, and instead of becoming an influencer, maybe try becoming a connector a shot.
All right. And I double down on the book Never Eat Alone. I read it too, and it's one of those books. Finished it. I realized that it changed the way I saw the world. And there
Yeah.
aren't so many books that did that. When you realize that, oh, I didn't understand anything, but now it's clearer. That's the kind of book it is.
Absolutely. A ringing endorsement. Jeff, thank you so much for talking to me about a topic that, again, I'm going to rephrase my statement. I'm not borderline obsessed. I am obsessed. There,
Not
there is
anymore. Not anymore. Yeah,
no, no,
you
no,
were
the more,
borderline, but I think the
yeah,
discussion helped.
yeah, the more you talk about it, the more you really start thinking about how am I connected to other people in my life, the more you realize it's okay to be obsessed with it, and it's okay to really dig deep into the idea of getting to know other people, and getting to know them in a deeper capacity.
On those wise words, we're gonna wrap up this episode. So if you listen to this, don't hesitate to leave a comment on the platform you're listening to this episode. Don't hesitate to reach out to us on our website that is in the description of the podcast. And see you next time. Bye bye.
Bye, everyone. Take
Ciao,
care.
ciao.